Whew. Pencils down. Welcome back to a very special live edition of the Just Mets podcast. A lot of these we do live, but special trade deadline edition of the show. Thank you for those of us who were trying to tune in live earlier today. Andrew was literally moments away from hitting the live button before the technology issues of all technology issues plagued him, which knocked him out. And naturally, it's Andrew Claudio's birthday today, so a tough bet for him there. But so likely we'll be doing this solo unless Andrew surprises me in the next few minutes. But the trade deadline officially has just passed. It's now 6:01 p.m. Obviously, deals will trickle in over these next few minutes. I remember there's been some years where there were deals that got reported 10, 15 minutes later. So we'll see what comes out here. But it does seem like the Mets are done here. Luis Robert Jr., very surprisingly, seems like he will remain a New York Met. We'll get into that more in a minute. But I would say with the state of the Mets outfield going forward, which I would say is probably their biggest strength at the moment for the rest of this year and going in next year, because you've got Soto, Ewing, Benj. You even have Morabito as depth in the minors, and some other guys in the system. The fact that the Mets were not able to move on from Luis Robert Jr., despite what they got back for some of their veteran relievers today, which was not particularly great returns, specifically for Brooks Raley, it looks like. I would say that pretty much says nobody in Major League Baseball really wanted Luis Robert. And if they did, they wanted the Mets to pay the entirety of his remaining contract. What he's owed next year is not guaranteed. I think that's a club option for $20 million. So the Mets nor anybody else would be picking that up. So that's not an issue. But what's he got? Probably $7-8 million left about owed to him the rest of this year. Maybe the Mets didn't want to pay that down. They did pay down part of Luke Weaver's. I keep saying Luke Raley for some reason. They paid some of Luke Weaver's contract down. But yeah, if on a day where they made how many trades, 7-8 trades the Mets made in the last 24 hours, the fact that Luis Robert is still here when the Mets very much do not need to hold on to Luis Robert, it says a lot. But I want to hear from you guys in the chat, whether you want to leave super chats or just regular chats. We'll go through them as we kind of analyze everything that went down today and react to it. And it was quite a day. I woke up originally at 6 o'clock this morning and saw that there had already been a Met trade hours before, waking up to the Huascar Brazobán trade where he gets traded to the White Sox. And then it really just seemed like it never stopped from there. Almost every hour, it felt like the Mets were making another trade. And it was, for a selling deadline where the Mets get one top 100 prospect in total, which I think is probably a little bit less than people were hoping for. It was quite exciting to watch. Just, you had no idea at any point, what were the Mets going to do? Who were they going to trade? There was a brief second where I don't know what corners of the internet this was on, but there was some false report that Lindor had gotten traded to the Red Sox. I hope that nobody ever actually believed that, but I saw some comments popping up on that on the our buddies on the Wind Up, who are also from the Mets Up Pod, James and Mark. They were getting a ton of comments about that, but obviously that was never going to happen, and the Lindor stuff can be put to bed at least until the offseason. But the Mets made a lot of moves, and let's first, before we go into all the Met moves, let's take a look at the final deals that trickled in just across Major League Baseball, because I'm interested to see what happened here. We've got Kirby Yates goes to the Pirates from the Angels, so that's another bullpen move for Pittsburgh, who just got Luke Weaver from the Mets earlier today. The Yankees didn't do anything beyond getting Luis Garcia and Elliot Ramos, which I don't know, pretty underwhelming. Like, I like Luis Garcia. I think that's a nice addition for the Yankees, but that's a pretty underwhelming deadline for the Yankees, really banking on guys coming back and getting healthy. And the guys they're banking on doing that are guys who historically don't stay healthy, in Judge and specifically Stanton. Judge often has more of kind of like fluke injuries these days. And there hasn't been many updates on him. Casey Mize did get traded at the gun to the Padres. Wow, from Detroit. That's a pretty big get for the Padres, who people thought were going to be sellers not that long ago. They wind up holding on to Mason Miller, so Mason Miller doesn't go anywhere. Luke Weaver truly was the best reliever that got traded at this year's trade deadline. Let's see what else. Anything else come in? Victor Vodnik went to the Marlins, which is interesting since they were kind of selling a little bit. I mean, I guess they mostly stood pat and more rearranging deck chairs, but Victor Vodnik goes from the Rockies, who that was actually a guy I was looking at the Mets to acquire last summer. He goes from the Rockies to the Marlins, the Orioles, who wound up going into a mild sell mode, are holding on to Trevor Rogers. Very interesting, by the way, that I put this out on our Twitter earlier today, but the three Mets that got traded in the offseason that we've talked about endlessly, and Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo, and not so much, but Jeff McNeil, they get traded to three different, that it was potentially the Braves were heavily after deGrom. There were, people were speculating years and years and years ago when deGrom was still on the Mets that he was eventually going to become a Brave. There's no report that says he specifically blocked a trade to the Braves. It just says that he blocked a trade, and we know that Atlanta was interested in him from other reports earlier in the day. I'm just going to put two and two together because it makes me happy and assume that Jacob deGrom turned down a deal to the Atlanta Braves. And if that is true, in my headcanon, it's an even better day for the Mets. Braves, by the way, they got a couple small pieces. Bad deadline for them as a first-place team that's trying to hang on to this division. It's really been playing from ahead all year long. I don't know that there's a team in the NL East good enough to grab it from the Braves this year. The Phillies are very flawed. They have one of the worst defenses in baseball, maybe the worst defense in baseball, and somehow decided voluntarily to make it worse today because they went out and got Luis Arias, and they're moving around basically their entire defensive alignment to put Bryce Harper back in the outfield for the first time in a few years, which I don't know how that's going to go. Luckily, it's, at least for them, it's a small ballpark. Bryson Stott's going to third base. Bohm's going to first base. Also, Arias can just stay at second base. Seems like a lot of moving and shaking for a team that I already feel like is very flawed and probably missed their window to win a championship or even realistically compete for one. But some interesting moves there. But yeah, I don't know that there's a good enough team to take the NL East from the Braves at this point. But I don't know that the Braves, they don't seem nearly as scary as a playoff team as they did at the beginning of this year. And they didn't really do much at this deadline. Again, maybe they tried to go and get deGrom and deGrom blocked it. And if that's the case, then I've never loved Jacob deGrom more than I have right now. But very interesting stuff. I'm going to, if you can give me a moment of live podcast producing here, I'm going to attempt to bring up an image that should hopefully showcase every move that the Mets wound up making as of 6 o'clock today. And again, unless something shocking comes in these final few minutes, it's now 6:10. This should be the end of it for the Mets and the moves that they've made. So let's try and get this up here if I can. Okay. All right. So in total, I have David Peterson on here just because technically not a deadline deal, but they did move him earlier in the year. So we're just going to count him in here. But in total, the Mets dealt this year from their major league roster. David Peterson goes to the Cubs earlier this season. Late last week, AJ Minter goes to the Minnesota Twins. Yesterday, Sunday, Freddie Peralta to the Rays. And then a slew of moves today as Huascar Brazobán goes to the White Sox. Brooks Raley goes to the Phillies. Luke Weaver goes to the Pirates. And then Clay Holmes and Tyrone Taylor in a package deal go to the Chicago Cubs. You'll see here the Mets acquired a slew of prospects. It's headlined by the middle infielder, shortstop, third baseman, Jefferson Rojas. You'll see at the moment, MLB.com has not updated the Mets top 30 prospects to reflect Jefferson Rojas because I'm not sure if that deal has become officially official yet. So at the moment, it does not say where Jefferson Rojas fits into the Mets top prospects. I would assume he's going to comfortably fit into the top 10. Curious if he'll get in the top 5. I would think probably. He was the Cubs' second-ranked prospect. Rojas is the only top 100 prospect per MLB pipeline that the Mets did acquire this trade deadline. He is ranked 63rd in Major League Baseball as of a few hours ago. So that's a pretty big get for the Mets. I was not sure if they were going to move Clay Holmes. Clay Holmes was a guy that I did really want to see stick around for next year. I really love what they've been able to do with him, and he's been such a positive addition to this rotation, especially, just in a 2-year stretch where David Stearns moves in the rotation vastly didn't perform. Clay Holmes was pretty awesome. They, of course, always have the option to attempt to sign him again as a free agent in the winter. It doesn't happen super often, but it's happened before. Jay Bruce, remember in 2017, they traded him away for Ryder Ryan. Terrible return that they got for him, reliever that I don't think we ever saw in the big leagues. And then they re-signed him going into the 2018 season. So it is possible. But that was a huge move for the Mets. It winds up being the last move that they make. Aside from Rojas, the Mets get shortstop Sammy Stafura, who is now their 10th ranked prospect. Again, this is without Rojas being entered into the system. Stafura they got back as the loan piece for Luke Weaver. I was a little disappointed that they only got one real piece back for Luke Weaver as the best reliever on the market. Apparently, Stafura grew up a Met fan, has like monster numbers in single A. He's only 19, so we're not going to see him for a bit. But he's slugging over 650. He's got an OPS over 1,000. So potentially a really exciting player that the Mets have at a young age. Outfielder Aidan Smith is now their 12th ranked prospect. They got him in as part of the Freddie Peralta deal along with Émilien and Pitre, who's number 15. Cole Mathis is now their 16th ranked prospect. They got him for David Peterson earlier this season. Gary Gill-Hill's the 17th ranked prospect now for the Mets. He was the third and final piece for the Peralta trade. He's a right-handed pitcher. Gabe Davis, another righty, their 19th ranked prospect. They got back from Brazobán. Outfielder John Spikerman, now their 27th ranked prospect, was one of the guys they got back from the Phillies in the Brooks Raley deal. Supposedly the Phillies don't have a great farm system, and he was ranked 27th in their system, so not sure what to make of him. Joe DeMayo was tweeting about him earlier today. He's like big, speed guy, but not a ton of contact, not a ton of power. Probably profiles at best as a fourth outfielder type. And then rounding out their top 30, shortstop Bruin Agbayani, who we do know is Benny Agbayani's son, so that was very cool. They also get 3 other minor leaguers who were not ranked in their top 30. Billy Amick, who is part of the Minter deal, Luke Gabrysh, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, the other part of the Brooks Raley deal, and then Zach Franklin, the other part of the Huascar Brazobán deal. And I think potentially there's somebody who is about to be joining me. So let's see if we can get him up here on the stage. And Andrew Claudio, the birthday boy. Andrew, can you see me? Can you hear me? I'm not sure if it is working or not. Andrew is going again. We'll see if we can get that to work. Potentially, if not, maybe get Andrew to record some thoughts on the side for us. But I'm going to bring this back up while we see if we can get that internet working for him. But yeah, this is the full allotment of what the Mets received. They get, again, assuming Rojas is going to be in their top 30, he is. If anything, he's going to be in their top 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 new players who are ranked in their top 30 prospects, 2 in their top 10, 4 in their top 15. So some solid stuff from the Mets. Again, some trades, I think, you got a smaller return than you were hoping. And then I think the Clay Holmes, Tyrone Taylor deal for Jefferson Rojas really kind of saves the deadline. Luis Robert winds up not getting traded, as we said. I was pretty surprised by that. But again, I think really tells you, I just don't think teams really wanted the guy. Sorry, just messaging Andrew right now. Yeah. So the guys who don't get moved, I didn't even put Lindor on here because he was never getting traded, even though many people really wanted to see that. But the guys who stick around, Luis Robert, as we've talked about, plenty. Kodai Senga, I know there was a rumor 2 days ago that the Padres were showing some interest in him. That's probably was leaked out by the Mets. I just don't see why teams would really want Kodai Senga at this point. Maybe if the Mets paid 100% of his remaining money, but obviously they weren't going to do that, so he sticks around. And then both catchers stay here, Luis Torrens and Francisco Alvarez, which, again, I agree with. Alvarez obviously has been, I don't even know if disappointing is the right word to use for Alvarez. I just don't think he's fully been the player, the hitter that we all were hoping he would eventually become. So I wouldn't say he's been disappointing. He just hasn't fully lived up to his potential. But that's not a guy I really want to sell low on at this point. And God forbid, he's still only 24 years old. You trade Alvarez, you get, a nice prospect return, and then he blows up and becomes the player you were hoping he would be for another organization. I don't think anybody would ever hear the end of that. So that is the state of the trade deadline. That's who has left. That's who's come in, and that is who is sticking around. So I think now we are going to attempt number 2 to bring up the birthday boy, Andrew Claudio. Are you with me? I cannot hear you.
But you tell me. Am I here?
There we go. Okay, it's on a delay, but I think we'll. Work
am I here?
For a few minutes.
Can you hear me? Hi, Rich. How are you?
I am good. How's your birthday treating you, my friend?
Oh, no. Been better. I'll say that. This is the delay that we apparently have to work with. I'm going to try and sign in from my phone, and then that'll be easier. Okay?
Okay. Andrew's going to continue to attempt to work out his audio problems and internet problems, but he's a trooper. That the fact that on his birthday, and I know he's got a birthday dinner to head to soon, he's still trying to make it work. So shout out to Andrew and Armand. Thank you for the comments. I'll be sure to bring those up if we can actually get Andrew on a steady connection here for a few minutes. I'm curious what his thoughts are. We really haven't discussed the moves too much together today. Between just, obviously I'm working a day job. That's why I couldn't start the stream until right when the deadline was ending. And then Andrew having the technical difficulties. We haven't spoken too much about the moves today. So I am very curious what he has to say about all this. And just, the team we are left with. By the way, I did not include him in our graphic that we just fully went through. The Mets technically did make one other trade today. They traded Ben Rortvit, the catcher, to the Dodgers for a minor league pitcher who had just been DFA'd by the Dodgers. His name is Chase McDermott. He is a right-handed, I think, reliever. Obviously not a ranked prospect. That move happened as well. I completely forgot Ben Rortvit was was in the organization. I was reminded by Michael Barron, my Just Mets co-creator, that he was hanging around there in camp, which feels like 1,000 years ago, back when we thought the Mets were actually a good baseball team. And yeah, that was another trade that the Mets technically did make today. I didn't include him in the graphic because it's Ben Rortvit. I made all of these. If you follow us on Twitter, I made all of these, trade graphics over the weekend just in case all these guys got moved. Ben Rortvit was not one that I made, so we were ill prepared for that trade. I think everyone will forgive me for that. However, the comment here quickly from Luis Mateo says, "How about Robert Polanco, Vientos, and Senga? Who wants that package?" I don't know. It sounds like a good package for the dumpster on the corner from around your house, Luis. Other than that, clearly nobody wanted these guys. Again, obviously you were never trading Jorge Polanco. He's over $20 million next year, probably a little bit shy of $10 million for the rest of this year, and has an OPS that starts with a 3, as I talked about a lot on Sunday's show. Vientos is hurt and bad. Senga is kind of expensive and very bad. And then Luis Robert, if somebody wanted him, the Mets would have traded. Like, look at some of the returns that they got for Raley and for Minter. Like, if they wanted to just dump him and not eat the money, they absolutely could have, and he's still here. So I think that says nobody wanted Luis Robert. And, can you really blame them? I can't. All right, we're going to try one more time with Andrew, who looks much clearer this time around. I'm going to unmute him and see how this goes. There we go.
How do I sound?
You sound like you're coming through a phone, but I think it's fine.
So just real quick, this isn't working?
No.
Okay, so I'm just going to throw this on the couch. Hi, Rich. How are you?
Hi, Andrew. Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. Just what you want on your birthday is to spend part of it at Geek Squad. So the Mets traded just about anything that wasn't bolted to the floor, huh?
Except for Luis Robert.
Except for, he clearly wasn't bolted to the floor.
I guess
very much.
I guess
on the
he
front
was
porch.
bolted to the floor.
Well, yeah, he was very much on the front porch. Then they were like, "Anyone take him?" And everybody was like, "No, we're good. We have enough goods." What have you? I missed the beginning. What have you gone through so far? What are your thoughts?
So I just did a quick synopsis of all the moves that the Mets made. We went through the trades around the league that trickled in right around 6:00. I talked about how Jacob deGrom may have blocked a trade to the Braves potentially, which if so, once a Met, always a Met. Jacob deGrom, love that. We talked a little bit about how Pete Alonso, Brandon Nimmo's, and Jeff McNeil's teams were all sellers too, which is pretty funny. Didn't go super in depth on any Met specific trade yet, other than the overall picture of everything. And honestly, the person I talked about the most so far was Luis Robert, because I actually can't believe he's still here. But I'm excited because I was just saying, because I was working and you had the tech issues, we really haven't discussed any of the moves today together. So I'm very curious your thoughts and reactions to all of the moves they made, because there was a lot that happened.
Yeah, it seemed like, and you know me, I'm always going to be pro like team that goes for it, team that I'm someone that defends even to this day, the bias for PCA trade, because the process and the principle is like, we're in first place. We have no idea what this center fielder that hasn't shown much offense will eventually show. And ironically, if they just trade Matt Allen, we're not talking about it today. A guy who was ranked higher in the farm system than PCA. So, like, you see what they got back for Holmes and for Tyrone Taylor, and this Jefferson Rojas kid is supposed to be like a solid bat. You see his numbers in AA this year or A ball this year, and he looks good.
That trade just became official just now.
Okay,
so officially official. Yeah, Jefferson Rojas.
I don't want to say the baseball gods owe us the Cubs sending us a prospect and him turning out to be an MVP candidate, but my goodness, would that be something? But that seems to be like a highly graded trade by those in the know. The kid that they got for Luke Weaver, which that was always the one I was fascinated by to see if the Mets actually went and made that trade, if they traded Weaver, because if you're allegedly trying to contend next year, you might want to keep Luke Weaver around. And the early return was that he's like a stocky power hitter, and then he turns out he was a Mets fan growing up. So now we love him and hope he turns into, the best thing since sliced bread, but from a local angle. Then there's like Nolan McLean and Carson Ben's teammate from OK State.
Yes.
They went and got another one. So they're basically just trying to be the Knicks and recreate the Villanova.
The power of friendship.
Right. Sorry, we'll beat you. We can't beat you with analytics. We'll beat you with the power of friendship instead. All that to say,
something tells me, by the way, that David Stearns does not value the power of friendship.
No, because Pete Alonso is not here anymore. Yeah, it appears. Although allegedly, the whole locker room was broken, and who knows if Pete was part of the problem. Look, all I'll say is that I would have loved if they had just found a team for Robert, because I don't want to watch Luis Robert play baseball for this team. I wonder if there's a DFA in his future that they just say, hey, we're not picking up your option next year, and we want to see Benj and Ewing get as many at-bats as possible. But if Juan Soto's really not going to play the last 2 months of the season, there's no harm in seeing what you have in him for 2 months and then just readdressing, like picking up his, if say he has 2 solid months, and then it's like, hey, it's a 1-year deal. We can now pick it up and trade you to a team that wants to keep you on an expiring contract. So yeah, overall it's always going to be tough for me to grade these deadlines because I don't know what these minor leaguers are going to eventually become. But it sounds like if the goal was just to trade as many players that had value as possible, it seems like they did. And we'll see in a year or two from now when some of these kids graduate to the majors, what they become. And thank you to everybody in the chat that's saying happy birthday. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll throw some of those up on the screen. And I think the very interesting thing about this as well is how many of these guys do the Mets actually plan on trying to develop and graduate versus how many of these guys are going to get flipped in 3 months because they are trying to compete in 2027. I think that's something that will be very interesting because they have in theory set themselves up to do that very well if that's the route that they're choosing to go to. And I kind of think that it is because I talked about this on Sunday, but David Stearns going into year 4 after the last 2 years, can he really afford to start a rebuild? I don't think so. His contract is only 5 years. He won't see the end of that rebuild if he starts one.
It's something that you'd need the blessing of your owner to like go into next season without the guaranteed or the expectation of competing, right?
And I think he'd need a contract extension.
Yeah. From him personally, he'd probably need security is the word we're circling. You need the security of if we don't make the playoffs this year, if this is another down year, because frankly, like it's next year and then the year after, right? He's in year 3 right now, so technically, if next year is bad, Cohen could be like, I got a year and a half, and you were supposed to compete. I'll pull the plug now. Granted, there is baseball next year. Right. That's an interesting angle of them trying to compete next year and just flipping all these guys. My wife was asking me, like, what happened to the Mets farm system? I thought they were ranked highly, and we just as you go through the timeline, when that initial report came out last year that they were like one of the higher ranked farm systems, and like then they have the deadline they had last year where they traded 2 of their top 10 prospects in those trades for Tyler Rogers and Ryan Helsley. We'll never forget him. Baez is like very much killing it right now in the Cardinals organization.
He is.
Then you graduate McLean, Benj, and Ewing into the majors. Tong takes a step back in his development.
Williams and Sproat get traded.
Well, you trade 2 of your top 5 prospects for Freddie Peralta. That's like 9 of your top 10 right there that are no longer factored into the calculation. So this is a reset. I feel like we're in 2023, but so much worse because there's less major league talent. And yeah, if we're just putting in the vacuum of this deadline, I'm satisfied that they actually went and got the lottery chips and possibilities. But we're so far away from me even thinking about this team competing in 2027, you know? So I wonder, it then becomes another conversation, like you said, about what Stearns was in the offseason. And, you know, the hole's going to have to fill.
I get that sentiment, and I've seen a lot of that on Twitter, even before today, just like people being like, well, don't even think about competing in 2027, which I understand. I don't have confidence in the guy running the show right now, obviously.
Right.
But it is baseball. And, you know, you say, well, like they had more major leaguers after the deadline in 2023. Their best player in the second half of 2023 was DJ Stewart, who didn't even make the team the next year. Actually, he did make the team the next year, but he was really bad other than one big home run he hit against the Braves that I remember from that season. There's like their pitching is very depleted, especially the bullpen. Obviously, they're going to have to totally build that back up. Although to David Stearns' credit, they had one of the best bullpens in baseball this year, and he acquired all those guys. Yeah, so he has done that before. So I'll give him credit for that. But the lineup is really basically the same.
Yeah. Can I ask you about the pitching?
Yeah.
So McLean, how you feeling about Thornton after Sunday's start?
For that being his worst start, wasn't that bad. I still feel pretty good about, like, I think ideally he's like your 5 next year, but like I'd feel good about him being the 5, I think. Yeah. At least as of now, unless he got killed the last 2 months of the year consistently. I feel pretty good about him.
It's one of those things where give him the next 2 months, show, because all of the, like, we all have Baseball Savant up on our tabs. We all saw the underlying metrics that showed that Thornton was getting a little lucky, but he was getting outs. Like you value guys that are getting outs. But if you pencil him in as a rotation guy next year with Christian Scott, with Sean Manaea as an option, I'm not guaranteeing, but as an option.
As of now, yeah.
You're really just looking at 2 starters, and if you're in the Skubal sweepstakes, then that's 1 potentially, and then you're just looking to have a better number 3 than the David Peterson, Kodai Senga cluster bleep that you went into this season with.
Right. And it's like, do you try to bring back Clay Holmes or do you go elsewhere in free agency? Like, those are some options. By the way, because I know we got to get you to your birthday dinner soon.
I've got like 10 minutes.
Okay. I do want to know your thoughts on Tarik Skubal going to the Dodgers.
So I share the sentiment that a lot of people, I think you also have, that I'm just not mad at the Dodgers. I have no ill will or frustration with the Dodgers about this. And I haven't fully been able to connect the dots from a, like, because they got Skubal, we're guaranteed a lockout now. And I do understand if you really pull back the layers that these small market teams don't feel the risk is worth the reward of trading away low-cost players because that's the only way they compete, that they have low-cost players through the first 3-4 years of their careers, and then they flip them for more low-cost players. That's the only game they can play, And the Dodgers can just be like, we don't care about low-cost players because we want all the high-cost players. So if that's the calculation, fine. How many times do you want to just make the playoffs if you're the Brewers? How many times do you just want to make the playoffs if you're the Rays rather than going for it? I'm always going to be in favor of the team that goes for it. Like, shout out to Jolly Olive over at John Boy, who does these great like trade deadline revisits where it's like all these teams that went for it and then the prospect turned into nothing. I know that the Mets are forever going to be attached to an MVP candidate and potential Hall of Famer in center field in Chicago because they went for it. But 90% of those trades usually turn out that the prospect never developed into what they were supposed to be. So I applaud the Dodgers for just like saying, screw it. Like we will give you the prospects that you want. And I just, if the Brewers end up like losing in 5 or losing in 6 or losing before they even have to play the Dodgers, and it's like, man, they could have used the starter, maybe an ace to Mizorowski. They only have themselves to blame. If the Rays in a very weak American League, fails to make the World Series or lose to the Dodgers in it to World Series MVP Tarik Skubal, they have only themselves to blame, not baseball, not the Dodgers, not the market, themselves. So it is very much KD going to the Warriors, but if the Warriors had already won 2 in a row, but yeah, I remain like more frustrated with everybody else than the Dodgers because I want the Mets to be the Dodgers. So how could I be upset with their process?
Exactly. And it's just, people look at the Dodgers like they're unbeatable and like deservedly so. They were 3 inches away from losing the World Series last year to a team that just sold.
Mm-hmm.
It's baseball. These teams can lose to anybody at any time, and you got to go for it, to your point. And I think the Brewers and the Rays are the 2 top examples. You can make the argument for anybody. Like, you can make the argument that the Braves should have fucking done it. I would have hated that, but the Braves had a terrible deadline. What did you do? You did absolutely nothing to fortify your team other than, get cucked by Jacob deGrom potentially. And I do think, and I'm not a conspiracy brain person. Like most 99% of the time, I'm like, no, that's stupid. I don't believe that like every team was like, we're going to let Skubal go to the Dodgers. But I think there's a lot of owners who are happy that he went to the Dodgers because they have been preparing for this CBA fight for years. And I think this is somewhat manufactured because it's not like the Dodgers went over the top and gave up this like insane package. Most people and experts in the know who would know the Dodgers farm system a lot better than me were like, that's not really a good package for Tarik Skubal. The Mets got more for Clay Holmes and Tyrone Taylor than the Tigers got for the 2-time Cy Young Award winner.
Isn't one of the prospects named River Ryan? Isn't he older than Juan Soto?
He's 1 year younger than Tarik Skubal, and he's in AAA.
Which does make me. He was ranked, so it does make me.
He was ranked.
Reconsider these top 100 lists.
I think it's other guy was the bigger piece. I can't remember his name. I think he's the position player,
the higher ranked one.
Yeah, but I mean that's not the return, even for a rental. That's not the return that should have netted him. And you look at that and you're like, again, the Brewers couldn't have beat that. Like, come on.
It seemed like they traded more for Dustin May and Romero,
Yeah, and like they went out and got Senzatella, and like in October, you're gonna look back on that and be like, man, we traded for Dustin May instead of Tarik Skubal. Like maybe that was a mistake.
Well, the Brewers have also been doing this for years, right? Like that's like we're looking at 27 outs. We're not looking at game 1 starter, game 2 starter. Our whole rotation, our whole bullpen is available for 27 outs. And I look at they'll have only themselves to blame if this is another failed playoff run. Also, there's one other team that I understand, because like looking back at the Ohtani deadline when he didn't get traded by the Angels and the packages that were out there, like that's the deadline that Soto got traded. Imagine if the Angels had made the Ohtani trade. Now, they wouldn't have gotten as much because Ohtani had no years left and Soto had 2 more years of control, or 3 more years of control. But like Junior Caminero was the prospect being offered for Ohtani, and they were like, no, this is the deadline we're gonna sign. We're gonna buy. And they went out and got a couple guys, and then they lost like 8 straight through the deadline, and suddenly they're out of a playoff race. All that to say, I understand the Tigers being like, we need to get something for this player. They have the 2nd highest run differential in the American League. Like, they could have just kept him unbought at this deadline and made a run and tried to win. And this may speak to your theory that it's like the Dodgers already have the best record in baseball. If they get Skubal, this now allows the owners to have extreme leverage that this team that prints money is not one that these small market teams can compete with. I just, like you said, it's baseball, and like the Dodgers were down 2-1 to the Padres and then had to not give up a run the rest of the series.
Right.
In that wild card round until they obviously won the World Series. And then whether you want to say they were 2 outs from losing to the Blue Jays or 3 inches, like if IKF slides, there might not even be back-to-back champs.
Right.
So, look, I do share the sentiment with everybody else that like game 1 Skubal, game 2 Ohtani, game 3 Yamamoto. Like, who's beating that?
Well,
team?
Yeah, now like
well, just like
maybe if it's like maybe if you had
like,
Skubal, maybe you could have competed, but now it's like like it's still baseball. Something funky could happen, and God knows the Dodgers have rotation injuries every single year. Not that it's mattered the last few years. It could still happen, but like now at this point that they got him, I don't expect anybody else to win, and the owners will probably have the argument that they want to make going into the winter, and unfortunately a lot of baseball fans will fall for it because they like to blame the players over the billionaires who don't actually do anything other than own the teams.
This wasn't a salary cap thing for me, I don't know, this was a which
I think is what makes it more egregious.
This was a you're too chicken shit thing for me. And the thing I'll always be frustrated when teams that are in contention think about the future. Like, you win a banner, it flies forever. The Knicks lost Mr. Robinson for nothing, and I don't care because a banner is going up to start next year. I hope I actually don't hope he's in attendance for it because I want them to play the Sixers. But one of the trades that you look at and it's like, wow, you lost that trade from a value standpoint is the Cubs trading Gleyber Torres and 2 other top prospects for 2.5 months of Aroldis Chapman. But you better believe no Cubs fan is like, we only got 2.5 months of Chapman, who then went back to the team he traded for, because that banner flies forever. I will always respect the team that has that aggressive mentality, which is why I understand the Dodgers are annoying. I respect their process, and they're stones at the end of the day.
Yeah, what's the old saying? Scared money don't make money.
Don't make money. Yeah. Like
I can promise you're not going to win a championship if you don't try.
Exactly.
And the Dodgers win because, for many reasons, but they're not scared.
Yeah.
They just go for it. And that's how you got to do it.
Yeah. However, what's even worse is when you're right behind them in payroll and allegedly did try, and you right now have the third best odds on all the betting markets to finish with the worst record in baseball. So. And
technically, if you go by what they're paying their players this year, actually, the Mets are above the Dodgers.
Oh, are they really?
Maybe not after all the trades. But it's the deferment. So you have to look at it differently. There's like total salaries, which doesn't include deferment. So the Dodgers are way ahead if you do that. which, by the way, I think that is the thing that needs to get changed in the CBA is there needs to be a percentage cap on deferments. But if you go by just what they are technically paying players in 2026 for 2026, the Mets are the top payroll in baseball, at least before trading these guys. I don't know if they traded enough guys to shed that much money to change it, but either way, pretty embarrassing. And if the Dodgers are the argument for the cap, the Mets are the argument against it.
Yeah, let these stupid teams spend all they want, like that's the argument that the players will make. Weren't we supposed to become Dodgers East? Yeah, that was the plan. We became Rockies East instead,
Angels East.
Angels East. That's what
although at least we sell.
Yeah.
Although the Angels did actually trade away some guys this year, not
they did
as many as they should have. They wind up holding on to Detmers, who was traded then wasn't traded, which I actually wonder if that's one of those things where, because the Cubs had traded for Reed Detmers from the Angels, which was like a big get for them. It falls through. Maybe there was a Wilmer Flores, Carlos Gomez thing happen here. Maybe it was just misreported. But does that make the Cubs more desperate, and that's why they give up a Jefferson Rojas for Clay Holmes, because they just had a big trade fall through and they need to pivot? And if that's the case, shout out to Artie Moreno. Yes. Shout out to the Angels for being incompetent as hell, because maybe they help the Mets out here.
Yeah. One other trade I'll comment on: the Adley Rutschman return is stupid. I respect the Red Sox for going for it. That is an insane haul, especially with Narvaez going back to Baltimore in the deal. So like a major league ready catcher going back to Baltimore in that trade. I understand what Rutschman was as a rookie, and I know he's had a better offensive season this year. But man, like the Orioles forever, just why I understand their process, was like, we just have never been able to develop pitching. So we're going to hope another organization has developed pitching, and we'll trade for their two most ready pitching prospects. And that's just the more you read about what the Red Sox gave up for a year and a half potentially of Adley Rutschman. Now, if I'm Breslow, and I would start talking extension right now with Rutschman, because then you extend him and it's no longer a year and a half. Like, you've extended him.
Big difference.
You get him through his prime, like, you're good. But yeah, that was an insane. That got me hopeful. Like, okay, maybe you should see what's out there for Alvarez or Luis Torres. That's what catchers.
I'm sure they listened. And yeah, because from the Orioles' perspective, because it came out and it was out there for like 5, 10, 15 minutes before they said what they gave up for him. So at first you're like, man, the Orioles just traded the franchise savior guy from like 3 years ago that they never wind up winning a playoff series with. They were supposed to be the next big team in the AL. It never came together that way, other than like 1 year where they got bounced pretty fast in the playoffs. And you're trading him in the division. And at first you're like, that's a pretty bad look for the Orioles.
Yeah.
But then you see what they got back. And I do think I bet the Mets had a similar situation with Alvarez, where they're like, we're not going to trade him unless we get an offer we can't refuse. The Mets clearly didn't get that. It seems like Baltimore did get that.
Yeah.
And that's when you have to make that kind of move. Again, not ideal to be making that kind of move when you just signed a first base DH to a 5-year contract in his 30s. Not ideal, but they got a very good return for the guy. So just in the vacuum, it seems like they did really well. And, from the Red Sox perspective, you can at least try to tell yourself, again, going back to the PCA thing, you're rewarding the team that just had their best month in the history of their franchise. They just swept the Dodgers on the road this past weekend. They're going for it, and the AL sucks. And we just talked about scared money don't make money. Again, Adley Rutschman is not that kind of player. He's not Tarik Skubal or anything close to it, but if he can have a positive impact on the Red Sox very unlikely run to the postseason, and they go on another Red Soxian run that we've seen in the last 20 years, like, nobody's going to care what they gave up to the Orioles.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. And then that's look, they're going to get Crochet back. They're going to get Roman Anthony back as well. So the thought can be, but like, Joseph O'Brien says it in the chat. Like, they should have been the Skubal team then, if this is what they're willing to give up for a catcher, you know.
But I guess the argument is like that team is already built on the pitching. They need to supplement some offense. They had different needs, especially if Crochet is coming back. Again, you could say just double down on your strength. It's not a bad strategy for sure if you're going into a playoff series and Crochet's your number 2.
Right. It's Crochet,
pretty
Skubal,
awesome. But
Sonny Gray, 1, 2, and 3. And you got in the 9th. Like,
but I guess if you're trying to make the argument of like, we're just trying to like create a more balanced team. We feel really good about the starters. We feel really good about our closer, but our offense is like real hot and cold. We need some more thump there. I see it. And, you know, not wanting to get bounced because one faction of your team was just way weaker than the other two.
I would say the Red Sox, in my opinion, are the second best team in the American League. What say you?
Would you have? Well, I guess it's curious. It's where you put the Rays.
It's just Tampa. It's just Tampa. I think they're going to overtake the Yankees.
So you have Tampa, Boston, then the Yankees third.
I think the Yankees have such a weird. They have a rotation that could beat any team in a playoff series. They don't have an offense that could survive any series, you know, like a series against us, you know. And
while I like them getting Luis Garcia, I thought they had a terrible trade deadline.
How is Austin still the primary catcher?
Like, that is truly banking on like judging Giancarlo Stanton, who famously never get hurt, will come back and stay healthy. Like, maybe it'll work out because they're the Yankees. Like, they're gonna make the playoffs. Like, and they'll probably win at least a round because they'll get matched up against a shitty AL Central team because that's always the matchup.
Right now, the matchup is them and the Red Sox again. Ooh. That's the 4-5. That's what I'm saying. Like, if I'm the Red Sox right now, I'm very confident that we can overtake the Yankees after the month we just had. And like you said, they just went for it and they're going to get healthier. If the same logic is applied to the Yankees, that they're going to get at least Judge back, they at least can have some confidence that they won't be scoring 1 run a game throughout the postseason. But if I'm a Yankee fan, I'm hoping that the Red Sox win the division and we take our chances with Tampa at this point, because I think I want no part of the Red Sox in a series with their pitching and them being able to, especially if it's in Fenway. And if you play a series in Tampa, you're looking at like half that ballpark, I mean 80%, 60% of that ballpark is going to be Yankee fans anyway. So, you know, we'll see what ends up happening. But the AL East I thought was the most active deadline. What's at the deadline? What up, David Crockett? The haul that the Mets got. Recap the Mets haul. Anything to be excited about? I would rewind the show. Rich has gone through. But what's up, champ? American League will be very competitive the rest of the season for sure. Ironically, the Orioles, who just sold, are just 2 games out of a wild card spot. So we'll see what they end up doing. Yeah, and
I was watching James Shiano a little bit earlier, and he had said a few weeks ago he had this prediction, but his bold prediction for the rest of the year is that a team that sold will still make the playoffs. And it almost happened last year because the Mets, remember, bought from the Cardinals and Giants and then had to standings watch them for a few weeks until they faded and the Reds caught them.
Remember the Drew Gilbert arguments? That he revitalized the Giants because the Mets traded him to him, and then they just didn't make the playoffs, and Drew Gilbert never made it back to the majors.
And how about the fact that I heard somebody talk about this like 2 days ago? Like, none of the guys the Mets gave up in that trade are doing really much of anything. Like, you hear about Jose Butto in a while?
He's hurt. And then Tidwell and Gilbert are like AAA players. Like, it's actually like the calculation Stearns made. The only one I was kind of upset with was Butto because he had like 4 years of control. But
yeah, you thought he could be of service to you.
a service, exactly, not like a core piece. He's one of these connectors, these middle inning guys. So, regardless, just to recap, but final thoughts from me on the Mets. Like they're significantly less watchable now than they were 24 hours ago, and they were already pretty unwatchable. I'm glad the Lindor stuff went away.
Me too.
They set out to trade 8 guys. They traded 7. So, we'll see in a year or two from now how we can fully grade these trades when we see what they become. I'm also, last thing for me, I'm hoping that Brooks Raley is a double agent, is a Trojan horse. And that he gets up like a big home run in the playoffs to the Phillies, and I can be like, oh, once a Met, always a Met. Thank you, Brooks Raley.
How about Brooks Raley pitches a perfect inning? He gets the last out, which is a fly ball, where once again outfielder Bryce Harper drops it, and then the Phillies. Oh, you didn't hear about this?
No.
I talked about it at the start of the show. The Phillies defense, which is already I think the worst defense in the major leagues.
Yeah,
they traded for Luis Arias, and they so want to keep him at second base that they're basically moving everyone else to new positions. So Bryce Harper's going from first to the outfield again for the first time in 3 years, maybe, like post Tommy John. Alec Boehm, who the Phillies can't pay anyone to get rid of, is moving to first base. Bryson Stott's moving to third base. And then Luis Arias is staying at second base. Surely that will work out for Philadelphia. You want to talk about run prevention? That feels like a team that's going to implode in a first-round series.
Where's he going to bat in the lineup?
Arias is such a unique guy because you could make the argument to hit him like second or eighth. I bet he probably falls somewhere in the middle, just to break up some of the power guys, but
he's also
RBI situations. He is. It's a weird fit. Like, he's good player. He's having a bounce back year after a couple not so great seasons. So I don't hate the move. It just seems like they've really upheaved a lot of their roster for a player that didn't super fit their team, at least defensively. So I don't know. It's weird, but I'm not super worried about, honestly, any NL East team making noise this year. None of them seem like they're that good.
Yeah.
It's really the Dodgers and the Brewers. And that's really, maybe the Cubs. The Cubs.
That's the other team.
I do really I think the Cubs may have won the deadline. I really like what they did. They got Gosman in addition to Holmes and Tyrone Taylor. They made a lot of moves. They unloaded Jameson Tyrone yesterday. That's a team that could be very interesting down the stretch, especially if PCA is going to stick to this hitting and not what he was the first 2 months or the last 3 months of last year. That's a pretty huge X factor for them.
Yeah. All right, we'll see. I apologize on behalf of the universe for my tech issues today, but thank you for letting me invade the post deadline live stream. And
I'm so glad you're able to come on. And again, from all of us, dude, happy birthday. We very much appreciate you. I hope you have a wonderful dinner with the family and everybody. And you can put your computer issues behind you for a few hours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Go install a temporary replacement when I get at home later. But and then hopefully the other one is not completely dead. But yes, thank you. And to everybody in the chat that has said nice things, and everybody online today has said nice things. What's up, Mr. Crockett again? Thank you for the well wishes. It is much appreciated. I think I got the deadline that I wanted for my birthday. I will find out in a couple of years just how good of a deadline it actually was, but we'll see. You are the man, Rich. Thank you for covering me today. And let's go Mets. Looking forward to this season being over soon.
Thank you, brother. Have a good night.
Later.
All right. I'm going to go through some of these chats that we have, and then I think we could probably wrap up. David Stearns, by the way, meeting the media. I'm going to scroll through and see if he said anything of interest. There was one thing I saw from 15, 20 minutes ago. Apparently, the Mets were attempting to acquire some controllable starters at this deadline, so guys who were under control past this year. He said, quote, they didn't line up on any acquisition costs, so that didn't wind up going through. Can't think of a move like that for the Mets with a starting pitcher, but years ago, I think this was 2017 when they sold. That was like the Jay Bruce for Ryder Ryan, and when the Wilpons refused to pay any money down on contracts, so they got back a bunch of shit prospects for Bruce and Granderson and Duda. Although Duda, they did get Drew Smith, who was pretty solid for a few years. But they did acquire, if I'm remembering correctly, they got AJ Ramos either in 2017 or 2018. I am mixing up my years potentially. And, they bought an AJ Ramos, but mostly sold that year because he was under contract for the following year. It didn't work out because AJ Ramos wound up becoming bad pretty much the second that they got him. But the process was essentially, okay, we can get this guy in now. He's not going to help us win this year, but he's under contract for future years and can help us as we're trying to retool moving forward, which is obviously something that Andrew and I were talking about that we think the Mets are probably doing here, is that they might try to flip a lot of these guys in the winter for more major league ready talent and veterans and guys who can help them win. Some more quotes from Stearns. Obviously, all the guys they got were minor leaguers, some closer than others. He said, I do think some of the players we acquired can and will help us in 2027. It's a little bit of a look into his mindset there. More on the approach at the deadline. He says, I think our approach was simply what's the best talent. So hopefully the Mets got that. And then some thoughts on some specific guys. He talked about Sammy Stafura. I'm going to need to learn how to pronounce that correctly. He said, quote, I think the ability and the ingredients to hit for some power have been there even previously. We've seen some bat speed upticks. Clearly, we've seen some exit velocity upticks that have allowed him to get there. So some optimism when it comes to Stafura's power. Again, I mentioned earlier, I believe he's slugging 650 in single A this year, which is pretty awesome, obviously. Is having a very good offensive season down there. And I'm just looking through some of his other quotes to see if there's anything else of note. Some more general statements, not where we wanted to be in the season, not what our players wanted at this point of the season. Everyone who we traded gave a tremendous amount to this organization, competed like crazy. So that's kind of the highlights from Stearns. I don't think he's still speaking, so that's probably the headline stuff. If anything else of note comes out, I'll let you guys know, or we'll chat about it on whenever our next episode is. Which, by the way, hopefully we'll have a special guest in a few days to help me recap everything that the Mets did and potentially some other teams did this past deadline, but TBD on that. Still trying to schedule things. All right, so let's go through some of your guys' comments, and then we can pop on out of here, and I can make dinner and try to relax because I went straight from my workday right into this live stream. Dan Lee over on Twitter asked, was there any market for Senga or Robert? We didn't hear very much. Padres were the only team I ever heard connected to Senga. I think the Phillies and maybe one other team had some interest supposedly in Luis Robert. Look, the fact that both of those guys are still here, I think shows you how little interest there was in those guys. Again, maybe if the Mets were willing to pay 100%, 80% of those guys' contracts, maybe they could have gotten back a low-level prospect. It clearly was not appealing enough for them to move on from these guys. And again, some of the returns that the Mets got today or in the past few days, they weren't all great. They weren't all of big note. The Brooks Raley one doesn't seem like it was super great. The AJ Minter one might not be so great. So they clearly were not opposed to moving on from guys like a Robert for, a smaller return. The fact that he's still here and Senga as well, I think would indicate that there really was not much of a market for those guys, barring the Mets doing something crazy, like paying all of their remaining salary. J Matrix Renegade says, Robert's still here? Boo. Yeah, I mean, I don't fully disagree. Cole Bogner says the same thing. Surprised they kept Roberts. Yep. Danley with another one. Shocked that Trevor Rogers, the Orioles, started and get traded. Yeah, I feel like the Orioles are weird. Like, they're one of those teams, kind of like the Angels, but they always kind of go like dip one toe in, but one toe out. Like, they didn't fully sell, but they traded Rutschman. They traded a guy or two, but they didn't fully blow it up. Trevor Rogers is a good player. Maybe the Orioles are that random team that's sold but still makes the playoffs. Who the hell knows? They're not that far back in the playoff picture in the weaker AL. Jeffrey Wong writes, the problem is the Mets have dead weight with Polanco, Semien, Robert Jr., Beatty, and Vientos, and they all remain kind of a head scratcher. Yeah, I mean, other than Robert and maybe Beatty, I don't know that I could have ever expected any of these guys to have gotten traded at this deadline. Polanco, we talked about him earlier. He's been so awful, like profoundly bad. Again, OPS starts with a 3, hitting $130 at this point. He's just been so bad, and obviously the injuries. And he's owed a lot of money for not just this year, the rest of this year, but also next year. The Mets could have paid 100% of that. I don't think anybody's trading for him. And obviously, why would the Mets do that? The same with Marcus Semien. He's under contract for 3 years, making a lot of money, and it's been very, very bad. If they could have gotten something for Robert, I really think that they would have, and he's still here. So I think that says a lot. Vientos is hurt, which I think if they wanted to move him, I feel like the injury really hurt them because his value is already at an all-time low. Beatty, I don't know. Did they shop him around? We really never heard Beatty's name come up at all in these last couple of weeks. So is that something maybe they look at in the offseason and they're just trying to recoup his value over these next 2 months? And also they just need to fill out a roster for these next 2 months. And maybe that's a winter move that they make. I could see that. But I'm not, other than Robert, I'm really not particularly shocked or even surprised that they didn't trade any of these guys because they were just too hard to trade. And one more from Jeffrey. Senga needs to go for sure too. Yeah, I mean, not surprised that nobody wanted him. And I, as much as I said this past offseason, I'd be shocked if Kodai Senga was on the roster in 2026, which obviously I was wrong about. I would be that much more shocked if Kodai Senga's on this roster entering 2027. There's just no possible way. J Matrix with another one. No one wanting us, quote, dead weight is unsurprising, but you figure Boy Genius would do his magic to get rid of someone like that. So I assume, J Matrix, you're referring to some of the players we just walked through. Yeah, I mean, there's only so much that you can do, whether you believe in Stearns or you hate Stearns. I don't think you could be super surprised that the guys who are still here, again, other than Robert, but clearly he had even less value than we thought. And I don't think we thought he had a lot. I thought he had a little bit more than he had because he's still here. Clearly, he didn't. KRS 1905 says, it feels like this is the day that the Mets decided to fully move on from the baby Mets, except for Alvarez. I mean, it's like an interesting comment because they didn't actually get rid of any of those guys. But if you're just talking about completely replenishing the farm system with new guys to start over with, I guess I could see that argument. It's a little bit more of an abstract connection, but I guess I could see it. But all those guys, technically are still here. So, who knows? you get to the point where with Vientos and Beatty specifically, it's kind of like, well, until they're off the Mets roster, I'm not sure if I'll believe that the Mets will actually get rid of them. Let's see. We got one from Adam Smith. Stafura and Voit very likely to be our future middle infield. Rojas could be dealt. Yeah, I could see that. Voit is red hot. Recently called up to Double-A. He's been killing it lately. I think he just won the whatever the league is called for Double-A that he plays in. I think he just won the Player of the Week. I feel like I saw that press release come in my email earlier today. So he's been great since getting called up. If the Mets can hit on two of those guys and trade the third, I think you'd sign up for that immediately. So that would be great. I don't even care which two of the three it is. If it's even one of the three, that would be a pretty good ratio, honestly, because what Andrew was talking about earlier, a lot of these prospects that wind up getting dealt with these deadlines, most of them don't wind up becoming anything. Prospects in general, the hit rate is pretty low because, a lot can happen on the road to development with different teams and the minor league systems, and it takes so many years for these guys to come up. And also, baseball is just really fucking hard, KRS with a comment about Zach Thornton. Thornton doesn't get rattled like a young player, but when he's off, he doesn't have much margin for error. Yeah, I think when Andrew was talking about Thornton earlier, he kind of reminds me of, you would hope, the idealized version of David Peterson from earlier in his career, or really before the wheels fell off last year, where he doesn't blow you away with the stuff. It's all about location and pitching to contact and getting the types of contact that he is pitching for. And you hope that, unlike a Peterson and unlike even like a Steven Matz before him, that when he doesn't have his best stuff, he doesn't get rattled. Because with Matz and with Peterson, you could see it kind of snowball on those guys at times. And when things weren't going well, it almost seemed like it was a self-fulfilling prophecy where it would just get worse and worse and worse. And then that's where those blow-up starts, where they give up 7-8 more runs happen. Maybe Thornton is a version of one of those kinds of guys. And look, for the back end of the rotation, making no money, I think that's honestly probably one of the better things you could expect out of a Thornton. So if he's a young David Peterson for the next 3-4 years at the back end and can avoid some of the more blow up moments, I think you would take that to the bank, honestly. Kaiser Sose says the Mets are left with at least half a dozen lousy players. Yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you're one of the worst teams of baseball and then you sell all your good players. The roster that is left remaining is really shitty. Really, really shitty. Let's see what else we got here. Only a few more left to go through. J Matrix with another one says, I'm not saying they will beat them, but the White Sox played the Yanks and Tampa tough. Yeah, I mean, I always just dismiss the AL Central teams against the Yankees because it just seems like the Yankees always get fed, an AL Central team of your choosing to beat up in the first round. As of right now, as Andrew pointed out, that's not the matchup that would happen, but I wouldn't have as much confidence. It'd be a cool story. I mean, God, the White Sox, if I would have told you a few months ago the Mets would be selling to the White Sox and the Pirates, you would have thought I was on the craziest drugs you could ever possibly get. But really cool story for the White Sox. I'd love to see them make some kind of run. I'm not super confident in them beating the Yankees, but it's a flawed Yankee team, and the Rays are always kind of weird. You can never really know what to expect from those guys. David Crockett, somehow I hate the Brewers a lot more than the Dodgers. Yeah, I mean, the Dodgers try, right? The Dodgers go for it, and you can't fault them for that. It's teams like the Brewers that are very good, but still hold themselves back because they have these self-imposed limits that they put on, and it leads to them losing in the first round very often. And it's a shame because the Brewers, the Rays, other teams like this should go for it a lot harder than they really ever do. Like, remember when the Brewers would go out and get CC Sabathia? Like, Tarik Skubal could have been this year's version of CC Sabathia. You just hope, they they don't fizzle out in the first round against the Phillies as they did in 2008. But they could have gone out and done that, but they didn't, and I think they deserve to get criticized far more than the Dodgers do. The Dodgers don't deserve any criticism for this. The other teams, the other 28, 29 teams deserve it because they continue to allow this to happen because they play scared, a lot of these teams. Couple left. Tim Shea, does Tong make his way back up, you think? Yeah, I think we probably see him down the stretch. Not that Clay Holmes has been in the rotation for a while, but now that he's officially fully out of the rotation, Peterson's out of the rotation. Peralta's gone now. There's a spot open. I don't think Robert's stock, shout out to what he did on Sunday against the Marlins. That was awesome, but I doubt that they're going to have him pitching every fifth day just because it really has no impact on the future for this team. He's 36 years old as a journeyman. Maybe sticks around for a little while as an eating innings guy, but I think you probably see Tong at some point. They did call him up earlier this year. You hope that he can maybe get some quality innings at the big league level under his belt and give him a little confidence going into 2027. And then for the organization, just see, do you go into 2027 thinking Tong could maybe impact winning, or do you feel like, no, he's either got to start in the minors again and we can't rely on him, or we just got to move on and trade him while we can? I think that there's a lot of evaluation with Jonah Tong and some other guys that's probably going to be happening over these next few months. So I don't know if they'll get called up right away, but I could see that happening pretty soon. Blue Jay M says, I thought the Mets did pretty well today, stockpiling the prospect pool and shedding a bunch of salary. Yeah, I don't really care about the salary stuff. I'm sure Steve Cohen doesn't mind it. I think they did pretty good. I don't think they did great. I think they did fine. I didn't want them to trade Holmes, but I think that's by far is the best return that they got. And I think that's what, I wouldn't say salvages it as if the trade deadline was a disaster, but the Weaver trade, and maybe this shortstop is better than some of us think, but I thought they would get a little bit more back for Luke Weaver, especially because they had the year of control next year. And I was kind of hoping that he only gets moved for an offer you can't refuse. Now, again, maybe they love this shortstop kid whose name I still haven't learned to pronounce. And it winds up being a lot better than we think for a year and a half of a relief pitcher that's been very up and down in his career, obviously having the best year of his career right now. But there were some moves like that, or the Minter move or the Raley move, where it seemed like a little bit underwhelming, not terrible, but just a little bit less than you were hoping for. And then the Clay Holmes and Tyrone Taylor package, I think you got more than you were probably hoping for. And then the Peralta deal is kind of like a mix and match of, it is both less than you'd hope for based on what you gave up for him, but then more than you probably should have got for him based on the actual numbers he's put together this year. Red Horse Adventures. The good news is the new GM, manager, coaching staff will have a new roster with their names on it. Minimal long-term contracts. Trading relievers in their mid to late 30s is always a win. Add that to expiring contracts, and the deadline was a success. Too bad none of the dead bats could find a home. Yeah, I think that that's a pretty fair takeaway. And I thought it was weird that people were upset about the return for Huascar Brazobán, who's been really good this year and has been a solid Met. I know he's got 3 years left of team control left. He's 30. He's about to be 37. I don't think 3 years of control left really matter when you're going to be 37, 38, 39 during those times. I had one guy on Twitter who said, who gives a shit? Why does it matter if he was 57? I think that matters. If you're talking about the years of control making him more valuable, I would argue that it doesn't make him as valuable because you don't even know if he's going to be an effective baseball player in the later years of his career. But overall, yeah, I agree with you, Red Horse. And I think that they did, again, it didn't blow you away. It's not the trade deadlines of years ago where, these Andrew Miller or Aroldis Chapman or Javi Baez PCA type deals are getting made quite as frequently. Even, Max Scherzer, Trey Turner from a few years, 2021, I think that happened. But I think that the Mets did well, and it probably as well as on the whole, probably did as good as we probably reasonably could have expected them to. Again, I know some of us were hoping for a little bit more in terms of the top 100 prospects, but maybe when the top 100 prospects list is updated at the end of the year, there's more of those guys aside from Jefferson Rojas in it, I'm actually going to check right now. Okay. So I guess somewhat breaking news. MLB.com has now officially updated the Mets top 30 prospects list. Jefferson Rojas is now the number one prospect in the Mets organization. So after acquiring him earlier today in exchange for Clay Holmes and Tyrone Taylor, the Mets do have a new top prospect in Jefferson Rojas. He's 21 years old. He's in Double-A. He plays third base and shortstop. His ETA, at least in term from MLB Pipeline's perspective, is they expect that he would be ready to make his debut at some point in 2027, which would put him at just 22 years old. So still very, very young. Right-handed hitter and thrower, 5'11". Let's see if I could pull up his stats real quick. He's got 55 hit grade, 50 power, 50 run, 55 arm, and a 50 grade in the field. God, he was born in 2005, which is an insane thing to say. I feel old. This season in Double-A, he is hitting 270 with a 339 on base, 461 slugging, 800 OPS. He's got 15 homers, 19 RBIs, 1 triple, 15 home runs, 19 doubles, 57 RBI, a triple, and 58 runs scored in 91 games. So say hello to your new top Mets prospect, Jefferson Rojas, who they acquired today, which really nicely rounds out their return. And, this day as a whole, I will flash up here. This graphic is not updated to reflect that Rojas is now their number one prospect. But in case anybody didn't join at the beginning, I know David Crockett, you asked about this a few minutes ago. But this is, again, one last look at the overall picture for the Mets trade deadline, including the David Peterson move earlier this year. So again, David Peterson, AJ Minter, Freddie Peralta, Huascar Brazobán, Brooks Raley, Luke Weaver, Clay Holmes, and Tyrone Taylor are all gone. Jefferson Rojas, now the Mets' new number one overall prospect. Sammy Stafura, Aidan Smith, Émilien Pitre, Cole Mathis, Gary Gill Hill, Gabe Davis, John Spikerman, Bruin Agbayani, Billy Amick, Luke Gabrysh, and Zach Franklin are now all in as minor leaguers. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 new players in the Mets top 30, 2 in their top 10, 4 in the top 15, 12 players total that they acquire. And then not being moved, Luis Robert Jr., Kodai Senga, both catchers, Luis Torrens and Francisco Alvarez, obviously Francisco Lindor, and other guys of that caliber still hanging around. That is the overall look at what the Mets did at this deadline. How did you guys feel about the deadline? Leave it in a comment. If you're watching this on our YouTube page, please be sure to like and subscribe, hype up the video, and all that fun stuff. If you're listening on one of the podcast apps, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating and review. It does so much for us. Again, we are closing in on 6,000 subscribers on the YouTube page. We're actually 9 away. So if any of you are watching right now are not subscribed to our YouTube channel, you could be our 6,000 subscriber, which would be amazing. And we would shout out that person if we're able to achieve that in the next couple seconds. So if you can do that, we would very much appreciate it. Thank you guys for joining and for sticking by us with the technical issues. We wanted to do this live stream more like 4:30 p.m. instead of right as the deadline passed. But I think this was a good stream. Glad Andrew was able to come on and join. Appreciate you guys all for hopping in the chat and engaging with us, whether it was on Twitter, on YouTube, or if you're watching this after the fact. We will be back soon. Again, I'll keep you guys updated on a potential guest for later this week and what next full episode with me and Andrew might look like. But until then, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Let's go Mets. Hang in there. Happy trade deadline day. And as the immortal Gary Cohen always says, we are out of here.